Welcome. Today we will be discussing about one of the stakeholders who is very important now for understanding how the business is functioning, because this stakeholder, though is silent in nature, has been represented very well by the civil society organizations and who speak about its rights and the duty of the business organizations towards this stakeholder, and this stakeholder forms one of the basic pillars of when we are talking of the sustainability issues. This stakeholder is the environment. So, today's discussion we will cover environment and business ethics. When we are talking of the environment, we are meaning the non-human part of the system, and which includes both animals and the plants. And when we discuss about environment, mainly what we will be discussing in today's modules are about certain philosophies of why the environment needs to be protected, taken care of, for whose benefits, and this has different viewpoints, different perspectives, like why the business should be taking care of the environment, and we'll look into the ethical issues related to the environment, and we'll also look into the sustainability and the environment and the sustainability issues. So, that will be covered through 5 modules which will be discussed under this section of environment and business ethics. So, when we are discussing about environment generally has, the discussion of environment generally takes 2 dimensions. One is that of pollution and another is that of resource depletion. Pollution refers to the undesirable and unintended contamination of the environment by the manufacture or the use of commodities. So, where we are trying to contaminate the environment through the undesirable or unintended contamination. So, that is understood by pollution. And when you are talking of resource depletion, it refers to the consumption of a finite or a scarce resource. Accordingly, the ethical issues will be discussed under these 2 headings when we are discussing the different ethical issues with relevance to pollution and how it can be prevented, and also ethical issues and steps taken for conservation of resources. These will be the major discussions when you are talking of ethical issues and how to deal with those issues in the domain of environment. So, there are various types of pollutions, as we see, like air pollution, water pollution, land pollution and noise pollution. Air pollution, there can be various types of air pollutions like global warming, greenhouse gases, ozone depletion, acid rain, airborne toxics, air quality. Water pollutions like organic wastes, dissolved salts, metals, radioactive materials, suspended materials. Land pollution, toxic substances released on land include acidic chemicals, inorganic metals like mercury and arsenic, flammable solvents, pesticides, herbicides, phenols, explosives, etc. Noise pollution can cause hypertension, high stress levels, tinnitus, hearing loss, sleep disturbances and other harmful effects. So, these are the classifications of different types of pollutions done to air, water, land or noise. And when you are discussing depletion of species and habitats, it includes examples where human beings have depleted dozens of plant and animal species to the point some have become extinct in nature. Forest habitats, when bulk of species depend, are being decimated by timber industry. Loss of forest habitats combined with effects of pollution have led to the extinction of a phenomenal number of species. So, depletion of forests fossil fuels were being depleted at an exponentially rising rate. So, like the example of coal and oil. So, these where we understand we need to conserve this depletion of resources, we have to go for conservation of resources. And in terms of depletion of fossil fuels, maybe we have to think of alternative sources of energy, renewable energies. So, these type of discussions will be followed in the next few sections. Now, we will be discussing on the ethics of pollution control. So, when we are discussing ethics of pollution control or ethics of related to conservation of resources, before we go on to discuss those things, it's very important to visit into the reasons why we should be doing it. What will motivate the business organizations to take the steps for either pollution control or the conservation of resources? So, there have been various principles, perspectives taken, and we will discuss each one separately. So, first perspective taken is what we call the anthropometric perspective, which discusses because the environment, all the entities which are non-human in nature, serves the purpose of human beings, human beings use them for their own purposes. So, if these resources get polluted, the air, water, land, noise, these gets polluted, then they are no longer in a position to serve human beings as it would have been able to do if it was not polluted. So, the pollution should be prevented for the self-interest of the human beings. So, this is called the anthropometric or the anthropocentric views. Like when you are talking of human centered, these are anthropocentric views of like why the anthropocentric views of why the environment should be taken care of. And this view is nothing new, but it has been prevailing through, like we find this in the writings of many philosophers, we find it in the writings of like Kant also, who was discussed, like man should not be providing harm to animals. So, if because harm is provided to animals, then the loss of certain good human values, qualities like thinking for the suffering of others, that is present there within human beings, gets lost. And if it gets lost, then that person will not be able to act in a moral way towards other human beings. So, in these writings also what we find, like as if it has been taken, the non-human part of the ecosystem is there to answer to the needs, demands of the human beings, and humans are superior than the non-human entities, and the care should be taken of the non-human entities for the sake of those non-human entities themselves, but for the benefit of the human beings, so that they can use them properly, or the human beings are able to be in a good relationship with other human beings. This is called the anthropocentric view of the, like when discussing about environmental ethics. So, the critics of these views have discussed that this view of the environment, like they need to be protected for the sake of human being, cannot be accepted, but the environment should be protected for its benefit, for the sake of itself, and not for the sake of the human beings. And this because the non-human entities have an intrinsic value, worth, and they have their right for survival also. This view, which supports the non-human entities having a worth and they have their own right to survival, and the prevention of pollution control, or the conservation of resources should be done for the sake of the non-human entity itself. This view is called the ecological view of ethics. The ecological system defines the interrelated and interdependent set of existence of the organism along with the environment. And ecological ethics suggest, like it is the ethical view that suggests that non-human part of the environment deserve to be preserved for their own sake, regardless of whether they benefit the human beings or not. It mentions like the the well-being and the flourishing of the human and the non-human life on earth have value in themselves. These values are independent of the usefulness of the non-human world for the human world, the human purposes. The richness and the diversity of the life forms contributes to the realization of these values and are also values in themselves. And human beings have no right to reduce the richness and diversity except to satisfy some vital needs. And the present level of interference of the human world's existence by the human interference is excessive, and it needs to be taken care of. And that's why, because there is an excessive interference and the non-human world needs to be preserved, taken care of, so it requires a positive step from the business organizations to implement certain changes to how to take care of these issues. So, this is called the ecological view of the ways of seeing, where the non-human part of the existence needs to be taken care of for their own sake and not because their existence is beneficial for the human beings. Secondly, when we are discussing this ecological views and we understand like the non-human existence needs to be taken care of and needs to be protected, the view that we take over here, example that we take over here is that of the last man argument, which asks the man to visualize like as if the man is a last survivor on earth. So, it is recognized like it is wrong for the last man on earth to destroy all who are non-humans. So, it is recognized like some non-humans have intrinsic values apart from humans, and because they have some intrinsic values, they need to be protected. By ecosystem or the ecological system, it is understood like all the subparts of the ecological system are interrelated to each other. So, the activities of one of its parts will affect the activity of the other parts. So, and the survival of one part is dependent on the survival of the other parts. Why the business perspective? From business perspective, it is to be understood like business is also in an ecological system. It's within interdependence of an ecological system in which they are operating, and it is essential for the business not to harm other entities to which they are interrelated, but it is the moral duty of the business to take care of the welfare, to protect the welfare of not only the human beings, but also other non-human parts of the system, because if they survive only, then the business is also going to survive. So, this is the ecosystem, ecological system viewpoint from the business perspective. If we are discussing it from the rights perspective, then we understand what we discuss as environmental rights. Like every human being have the right to fulfill their capacities as free and rational, fulfill their capacities as as having an access to a free and rational livable environment is essential to such fulfillment. So, if they have to fulfill their capacities, then they have to have an access to a livable environment. So, when the human beings have the right to a livable environment, and then this right is violated by practices that destroy the environment. So, because it is intervening with another of the major rights of the human beings to enjoy the right of living in a livable environment, then such environmental rights can lead to absolute ban on the pollution, even when the costs far outweigh the benefits. So, because we have an absolute right to the environment, for a livable environment, and for which will fulfill the capacity of life to survive and to function as a free and rational human being. So, and the destruction of environment may lead to this reduction in the quality of a livable environment. So, this may lead to absolute bans on pollutions. So, this is a very traditional view, and if you are talking of absolute bans on pollution, it may so happen you come to a conclusion where it is like no business is functioning, because you cannot guarantee like you will not be polluting the environment through maybe in the process that you are following in your production process. Or so this though is desirable, what is required is an absolute ban, there is no pollution sort of condition, but in many practical situations it may not be possible to achieve such an ideal condition where there is absolute ban on pollution. And maybe whatever steps you take to take care of the issue, like you are not polluting the environment, but still some pollutions may happen. Now question comes in, who are going to pay for the pollution that has been done. So, that is who is going to absorb the cost of pollution and what are the costs associated with pollution. So, when you are discussing about the costs in terms of costs of the products or services, we discuss two types of cost. One is the private cost and the other is the social cost. When we are discussing private cost, this means the cost an individual or company must pay out of its own pocket to engage in a particular economic activity. When we are discussing about social cost, it is the private internal cost plus the external costs of engaging in a particular economic activity. Debate may arise regarding what happens with the external cost, who takes share of these external cost. So, this is described by the market views of the pollution. So, the total cost of making a product includes the seller's internal private costs and the external costs of pollution paid by the society. So, a supply curve which is based on all costs of making a product always lies higher than one based only on seller's internal private cost. The higher supply curve crosses the demand curve at a lower quantity and higher price than the lower supply curve. When the seller's cost is include only private cost, too much is produced and the price is too low. This lowers the utility and violates the rights and justice. Why it violates the rights and justice is because when we are discussing like the external cost is paid by the society, then the persons in this society may not be accessing the products or services, and the others who are actually accessing it are getting it at a lower price than that they should have paid for it. So, it is violating the justice in the sense it is not doing equitable distribution of the burden of sharing the cost is not there, and it also it's also like it is not answering to the right of the society who is who is like sharing the external cost, the right of those in that society to have a right for livable environment is also violated. So, the market approach suggests like that these costs should be internalized by the organization. and this discusses about internalization of the cost of pollution. So, absorption of the external cost by the producer, who then takes them into account while determining the price of the goods. So, and then they are actually priced maybe at somewhat higher than only when the private cost is taken into consideration. We can look also into the optimum level of pollution control or removal from the utilitarian perspective. This is where the cost of removing pollutants rises as benefits of removals fall. Optimum level of removal is a point where the cost is equal to its benefits. But however, when the cost and benefits are not measurable in proper terms, utilitarian approaches fails. So, when it fails, when the cost and benefits are not clearly measurable, some use precautionary principles and others use the maximum rule. This we will be taking up in the next module. Thank you.